Assalamu alaikum, good evening viewers. Welcome to another edition of Legal Ease, where we try to make the law as easy as possible for you and especially for the layman. Tonight we've got a really interesting topic which I believe most people are interested in. It's something we talk about very often, but very little seems to be done about it. We're going to talk about the employment conditions of imams and muazzins in the masjids, particularly in South Africa. It may have relevance elsewhere, but we're focusing mainly on the South African situation. And to assist us with this, we have a guest tonight who's an expert in the field. Our guest this evening is Sheikh Zakaria Matiani, who's got wide experience. He's obviously studied widely. He studied about 7 years at the Darul Uloom, where he also did several years of Quranic studies. He then went over to Cairo, where he studied for 5 years, studied the Arabic language and studied more about Islam. So Sheikh Zakaria, Jazakallah for agreeing to come, and welcome to ITV.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be on these programs. And alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us the ability to only say that which is beneficial, inshallah.
Ameen, ameen. Viewers, we've been on this program before where we've discussed the labor laws, we've discussed the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, we've discussed the Labor Relations Act, and tonight we're going to look at how does this impact on imams, or the works of imams, the work that imams do, the employment of imams and muazzins, because the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, some of you may know or you remember from previous programs, looks at basic conditions. It looks at hours of work, it looks at leave, it looks at sick leave, it looks at working conditions in the workplace, it looks at overtime work, and we also have sectoral determinations, for example, for domestic workers, for taxi drivers, for other retailers where they have minimum wages. And then, of course, we have the Labor Relations Act that deals with fair and unfair dismissals and treatment. We have the Employment Equity Act that deals with employment equity in the workplace. But what I've done, I've asked Sheikh Zakaria to come and tell us specifically about the work of imams, who the imams are, who they are supposed to be, what they are supposed to be, and as well as the muazzins, what's the work, what's the function of these people, and how important a role they play in the community. Yet we know it's an unregulated position that these two people hold in our masjids, and maybe we need to find a way of dealing with it, because we often hear stories of imams in the masjids and muazzins in the masjids being underpaid, not having proper working conditions. We know, for example, they don't have medical aid and other benefits, pension schemes that other employees, and I know I'm generalizing, there may be some masjids, there may be where they are taking better care of their imams and the muazzins. Sheikh, start off with you. Tell us who the imam is, who the muazzin is, what their function is, and what it should be.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem, amma ba'd. In fact, this is a strategy which is always used by the scholars who, when they mention in the chapters of fiqh, they would normally use the term called hukmu shay'i far'un an tasawwuri, that it is important firstly that you give a full picture of the matter that we're speaking of, so that people can understand the discussion which is taking place. One of the things that we need to understand firstly, and many people don't understand the hectic job of an imam. It's firstly an imam, he needs to be somebody that is a master in the Arabic language. And when the imam is a master in the Arabic language, the second thing is that the imam needs to have qualifications in Islamic jurisprudence, meaning that he needs to go through a certain training to teach him how to utilize the Quran and the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after that, basically he needs to be good in the Islamic sciences, understand the different the different meanings that you get in the Quran, how to interpret the Quran, how to use the Quran for certain situations, how to understand the ahadith. So he basically needs to have a whole understanding of the Quran and hadith. Now that is which every imam has to have with him. And then secondly, we know that the imam obviously is a person who's going to work in the community. So the imam will then have to have community skills. He'll have to have leadership skills because he's the leader of the people. That's the meaning of the imam, is the one that is put in front. He's the leader of the people, so he'll have to have leader skills. And then also we know that the imam, he needs to acknowledge and be cognitive of his community, meaning that visiting the sick, knowing who's graduating, knowing who's giving birth, for example, going to visit the youngsters, the youth. As the imam needs to be a spiritual leader, he needs to give spiritual advice. Then we have where the imam needs to have educational gatherings in the masjid, and what is convenient for the people, what discussions do you speak about. Then the imam needs to observe. And one of the beautiful things that we learned in Egypt was that it's not just, nothing happens coincidentally in Islam. Everything that we do, which is taught to us by the Prophet ﷺ, has a benefit. Now, normally in the Arab countries, after every namaz, you would find that they turn around. The imam turns around. What's the significance in that? That is what we call observation. So after Fajr, when you turn around to make your adhkar and read your zikr and whatever, you in actual fact need to observe as the imam who is present from your community. That is why we call this taking registration and looking at who is in the masjid and who is not, who is absent. Probably that person is sick, so you'll need to go and visit him. Or that person hasn't come for a few days. What's the problem? What's the reason? That's why the Prophet ﷺ after Fajr would ask, where's this person? And where is this person? So the imam needs to observe his community. Then the imam has another role of the youth in his community. And we know that the youth are going through difficult times. For example, the imam needs to know how to deal with a youth, or with a youth who probably is confused in his sexuality. For example, a youth who is confused in his Allah, he's turning to atheism. How do you deal as an imam? And then the imam also needs to know that where is his place? How do you approach certain matters? How do you take a step back and refer these matters away? So being an imam is not just somebody who comes from home and then go on to the musalla, recite some Quran, and then assalamu alaikum, and then everything is over, and that is it. It is being an imam, the stronger the imam is, the stronger the community will be. And the stronger the community will be, the stronger that city will be. And the stronger that city will be, the stronger that country will be. And the stronger that country will be, it will have an effect on the world. So it begins from the imam. And the imam is the person who plays the biggest role. That is why we find that to give us the satisfactory notion of this year is the example that none other than the Prophet ﷺ, who, if we understand our seerah, on his dying bed, two men, one was Sayyidina Ali, and one was, if I'm not mistaken, his grandson, Sayyidina Hassan or Sayyidina Hussein, who were carrying him on their shoulders, and he could barely walk, and they were basically dragging the Prophet ﷺ, and he wanted to lead the community. So what does that tell you? That on his last, in sakarat, ready to meet what is Allah, yet the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us something, that he wants to still be the imam, because that is the importance of the imam.
So clearly an important, and the masjid clearly a very pivotal place in the community, needs to play a very important role. It's not just go there, read namaz or read your salah and go away. Very important. So therefore the imam, we need to as a community look after the imam. We need to ensure that the imam works decent hours so that he has time for his family as well. He needs to take leave as well. The imam gets sick as well. He needs to be paid at the time when he was sick. So those type of things need, and of course we'll talk about salary. Community needs to ensure that imams are paid a decent salary. We don't have minimum salaries for imams, and different imams get paid different salaries. Maybe that's
True.
something that needs to be standardized, and we can do that through obviously things like laws, or communities can do that. Have you got any ideas on that?
I mean, one of the things is laws, bringing in laws. I was just reading an article where they made mention that taking this forward to the government and getting them involved and so forth. One is that, one solution is that way. But the second solution is, Alhamdulillah, in this country, Allah has blessed our Muslim community with abundance of wealth. Allah has blessed our community with abundance of resources. Right. Why do we only depend on a certain small group? I mean, a friend of mine recently said to me that he has not been paid for 4 months. Right. And he was the imam. I mean, what is this fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The imam has the same, like, and the question needs to be asked, that those that are giving the salary of the imam, you take that salary and see if you can survive with that same salary. Something which we call empathy in counseling. So put your shoes in the shoes of the imam and see how does your month go about with that salary of the imam. Then they give you the argument and say that the imam, he just has to come for the salah. He's off at certain times. There's another imam, so let him do something else. Now that is where the problem comes. That is where that argument is totally incorrect. Why? Because the imam needs to be the person who has that comfort and the concentration, and he needs the time. You can't be doing, imam shouldn't multitask. For example, being the imam, doing a business, it just becomes difficult for you to even concentrate then on the musalla, for example.
And you get that argument sometimes. Well, he only works a little bit in the morning, then in the afternoon he can start his own business. But maybe this is an appropriate time to take a break. Let's have an ad break, and after the ad break, we will continue, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum again. Good evening. If you've just joined us, we're talking about employment conditions of imams and muazzins in our masjid, and our guest, of course, is Sheikh Zakaria. We're talking about who the imams are, who the muazzins are, and who they should be. We're looking at whether the labor legislation makes provision for them. We know of many cases where people don't have medical aid, they don't have other facilities like pension schemes that people have. We also know that employers do not contribute UIF for imams and muazzins, and maybe it's time that these things should change. And therefore we've got Sheikh Zakaria, who knows about the role of imams, who knows about the role of muazzins, talking to us this evening. Sheikh, just before the break we were talking about how important the role of the imam is in the masjid. Even after the salah, you said he turns around, he looks at because he's like the monitor or the register to see who's there, who isn't there. And if somebody isn't there, we'll then inquire, maybe the person is ill, and go visit the person at home. So those type of things are also important. We also then said the imam also has problems like other people. He also needs an income like other people. He's also got a family to support. He also has to send kids to schools. He also has aspirations like anybody else. And that's where we were before the break. Viewers, you will notice that the phone number is on the screen. It's 011 086 7777. If you have any questions for Sheikh Zakaria, please call in. Or if you have any comments or anything you want to say about the imams and muazzins, feel free to call in, inshallah. Sheikh, over to you again.
So, and basically coming back to the muazzins also, that is another catastrophe of its own. And I think so, having to have experienced my father being a muazzin, and just looking at the situations and the difficulties that the family goes through, because the muadhins have a life, they have a family, they have children, they have sacrifices that they go through. But on a general note, one of my that I've always noticed was that not only should we worry about increasing the pay of the imams and the muadhins, but also empowering the imam and the muadhin. So that is why I'm saying this needs to be something which the community needs to get people involved. Like, for example, when we read the works of Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, one of the senior scholars, you would find that sometimes when they get a modern or some, or what do you say, when they get say for example a current question in Islam, say for example like abortion.
Right.
Right. Now you would find that they would bring on doctors, they would bring on lawyers, they would bring on priests, they would bring on different people who are qualified in those professions who could contribute to that. Right. And then they would all sit on the table and they would discuss this matter, obviously with the scholar being present, and they would come to a conclusion. So my reason for saying this is that this matter of the imam and the muadhin is not just for one person to. It's communities that needs to get together. It's the lawyers that needs to get together. It's for us to understand the situation of our country, so we'll have maybe our elderly people also who have wisdom to come onto the table. Those that are ready to contribute towards this, they also should be on the table. Scholars should also come and sit down. The Islamic theologians, everybody should come and participate in this. Yeah. And what we should draw from, what we should extract from this discussions is, firstly, there's so many things which, and we need to start this movement. Right. It needs to start. Yes, we're not saying that it has not been started already, but it's something which is very important. Why? Because the imams, you can't just complete from a Darul Ulum and become the imam immediately. Why? Because the imam needs to go through certain training. Right. The imam needs to understand his place in the masjid. You're not the father of the entire community. You can't solve every problem as the imam. You can't give every solution to the problems that come to you. Sometimes you need counseling skills. Sometimes you need psychology skills. Sometimes you need communication skills. Sometimes you need to transfer them to those that are qualified. Because what happens is then you will put yourself on pressure. And I've seen it, because you try to assist everybody. You've got so many, and the worst is for you to give them your phone number.
I can imagine that. Yeah.
Then it's messages, and they're calling you, and imam, and now this one is calling you, and you're trying to figure out this, and this one is saying, I'm still waiting for my question. So you become a person who needs to deal with your family. You have your own family problems. You have your own family cases, and you're taking on other cases. Right. That is one. So the imams need to have workshops. They need to design programs that the imams can become skillful in that. Secondly, the muadhin. How many masajid do you go to? You can't stand the pronunciation of the muadhins even when they give the iqamah. Right. The Arabic grammar, firstly, is incorrect sometimes. I mean, sometimes you'll find a qualified imam. How do you continue with him pronouncing it, not even pronouncing what we call the makharijul huruf, where the letters exit from, the pronunciation of those letters. Then if he's pronouncing the adhan in that manner, now what happens if something happens to the imam? Yeah. Because the muadhin is the representative of the imam, not the person on the right or the person on the left. If that imam steps back, if something happens, the next person, who is the vice-gerent or the vice president or the leader, is the muadhin who needs to go forward. So his tajweed needs to be in place. What if the imam becomes late for a khutbah or is stuck in traffic or whatever? The muadhin needs to take that place, for example, if there's not other scholars, so forth. So we need workshops for our mu'adhin. Apart from them being poorly paid, the treatment towards the mu'adhins. I mean, sometimes a person doesn't even know if the mu'adhin has a family. You don't even know his children's names. You don't even interact with the mu'adhin. You don't even know his problems. You don't even discuss with him. You know, I was listening to one lecture, and this person said, Mulana, make dua for me. And the Mulana said to him, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make your son a mu'adhin. Yeah. And the person said, Mulana, why are you making such a dua for me? Please make a better dua. That is a bad dua. Oh, yeah. You know? So this is how the mu'adhin is looked down upon. Right. Something which was the signs of honor in Islam, which the Prophet ﷺ, to show the end of racism and to eradicate it from the hearts of the Quraysh and to show them the beauty of Islam and to teach the Sahaba, he made Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu go onto the Kaaba. Yeah. And we must remember that the Kaaba was so highly revered by the Quraysh, and that you remember when they wanted to put the black stone, how they were about to draw swords and go to war. Yeah. And the Prophet ﷺ said each person should hold a corner of the cloth. And here they seeing this slave from Abyssinia, yeah.
Former slave going up.
Former slave going up and giving. You can imagine the message which the Prophet ﷺ is sending to them. And then the Prophet ﷺ makes Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an the Imam in Medina. And he instills it into the hearts of the people that this is our Imam. I mean, this is our Mu'adhin. That is why in the conquest of Jerusalem, in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, when the priest of that time said he will only give the keys to Umar. When Sayyidina Umar came and when he was given the keys, what was the request? Those same Sahabas whose beards were black in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, whose beards now have turned white, grey. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, Khalid ibn Walid, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, all in that gathering, and they all say, Bilal, please give adhan. Right. And Bilal gives adhan in Jerusalem, and all of them remember the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and their beards become wet. And then when the Prophet ﷺ passed on, Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an, he said to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, I can no longer stay in this place of Medina. Please let me go. Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, but we need you, Ya Bilal. He said that, did you free me to keep me for yourself, or did you free me for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, I freed you for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Bilal said, please let me go. He went away and he went with his family, and then he saw the Prophet ﷺ in a dream. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Bilal, ma hadhi al-jafa. What is this foolishness, O Bilal? Why are you not coming back to visit me? And Sayyidina Bilal came back, and he was requested by Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an to give adhan. He said, you know my situation. And then he met the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, and they came running to Sayyidina Bilal and they hugged him. And after they hugged Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an, when he entered, they requested him to give the adhan. And when he gave the adhan, the people exited from their homes. There was wailing, crying in Mecca, in Medina. People remembering the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, when he came to Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, he choked. You know, he couldn't go further. So this was the status of the mu'adhin in Islam. And that was the sign of the mu'adhin in Islam. But where is the respect for the mu'adhin? Where is the love for those that are calling towards the adhan? And we need to empower the mu'adhin. If his adhan is not correct, I remember they always told us a joke of the mu'adhin where he didn't know how many times to give the adhan, so he would get confused with Allahu Akbar. So the person wrote to him Allahu Akbar times 4. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah times 2. Ashhadu anna Muhammad times 2. And the mu'adhin came and he said, Allahu Akbar times 4, you know. So we need to empower the mu'adhin. Okay. Basically teach them how to give the proper adhan. Right. Even if we need to get somebody that can teach the tone of how to give the adhan, you know, in different tones. I mean, isn't it beautiful when you are sleeping at the time of Fajr and you hear this beautiful adhan? Yeah. It just makes a person inclined towards the masjid. And when you hear that horrible adhan, you know, you just feel like covering your ears with, you know. So basically, it's also One is the salaries of the imam, that is, and the muazzin. That is something which needs to be discussed, which needs to be. Secondly is empowering your imam and your muazzin, because their empowerment is for your kids, for your problems that we have at home, empowering the imam to now to work in the community, to know how to educate the people in the masajid, to know which topics to choose, to be at ease, that he doesn't need to worry of any financial problems. And this is what my teacher in Egypt always complained about. He was poorly paid, and he said to me, always used to say to me, أنا مشغول دائما. I am always busy. وصعب لي أن أستعد للجمعة. It is difficult for me to even prepare anything for Jumu'ah. I'm here, then I'm doing this, then I need to meet this person, then I need to go here, then I need to come back there, then I still need to prepare the Jummah. So we need time. The Imam needs time to prepare this. They need time to sit down. And in fact, I met one of the, I met somebody who was telling me of an app that some of the Christian priests have, which has the whole community of that circumference where the Imam is. It has the whole community on that app, right? And that app will send out a signal to the Imam on whose birthday it is, for example, or whose funeral, who has passed on, or who's giving birth, or who's not feeling well, or who's leaving on a journey, you know, and he would go in throughout the day. That is what he would be doing, because he is the person which is bringing together the community. Where's that app?
Yeah, so it's time that the Imam and Muazzin's position gets reclaimed, and we can continue with that after the break. Time for a break again. Viewers, please stay with us. Come back. We'll continue discussing the position and the employment conditions of Imams and Muazzins in South Africa. Assalamu alaikum viewers, welcome back. We're talking about the employment conditions of Imams and Muazzins in South Africa, and just before the break we were talking about how important these positions are, and we're talking about them having the same aspirations as other people. Sheikh gave us an example of a very senior Imam in Egypt who said that he's too busy and the poor man is underpaid, and that got me to think clearly. It's about time that in masjids we have not one imam but two imams and two muazzins in every masjid, so that people can work decent hours and have time off and work in accordance with the labor legislation in South Africa. And the busy periods for imams obviously is approaching Jummah, where they have to give a lecture, and it's not just standing there and talking for 15 minutes, but it takes a lot of time. Those of you who've given lectures before, who stood on a platform, who made speeches, you will know that it takes a long time to prepare for these lectures, and particularly an imam in the masjid who gives a lecture is talking to the community. He needs to make sure that it's a really, really special lecture, and it needs to be based on current affairs, Sheikh. But let me just remind the viewers that if you want to call in, please feel free to do so. The number is on the screen. It's 011 086 7777. If you have any questions for Sheikh Zakaria, or if you have any comments about imams and muazzins in our masjids. Sheikh, we were talking about how important this position is and how they need time as well. And you said that the muazzin obviously needs to be trained, because some of them can't give proper. And during the break, I was just thinking that the better trained the muazzins are, probably then they can command better salaries as well. People will then feel, look, the people are highly trained, and what they do now, because they can pay a low wage, they get anybody off the street and say, you are the muazzin.
Yeah, it's like basically hiring a security guard in today's time, you know. Yeah. So you just pull anybody. One of the things also that we need to understand is we don't want people saying that, you know, my son didn't make it into law school or medical school or whatever, and that is why we sent him to the Darul Ulum. You know, we want people to stop saying that. And the only way also is for the imams also to, that's why I'm saying the whole blame is not only on the community and so forth. When a person finishes at the Darul Uloom, that is your basic steps to taking it a step further. And when I say a step further, my proof for this here is, for example, I'll give you an example of Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, who was a student, who was a scholar from Damascus. And he studied under two of the scholars who were greatly, highly respected and were the last two scholars in the Ottoman Empire, none other than Sheikh Mustafa al-Sabri and Sheikh Zaid al-Kawthari. And they were phenomenal scholars, amazing scholars of their time. And they were in the time of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, who was at his final points, who was called, who was witnessing the decline of the Ottoman Empire. Now what happens is that these scholars, Sheikh Mustafa al-Sabri, Zaid al-Kawthari, were highly respected. Why? Because it was Islamic rule, Islamic laws. And what happened after that was that when the Ottoman Empire fell, obviously the Islamic law fell, and European and Western law came into existence. And the Islamic law was now something which was by the way. So people started studying law and medicine and becoming engineers, and that was looked up as of high caliber. And Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda is witnessing the incline of scholars and the decline. So he's basically in a revolution where he witnesses the decline of scholars. So Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda speaks about this here, and he says that scholars, the decline just continued, and scholars were looked down upon, and to become a scholar, like for example in today's time, even the Al-Azhar in Egypt, for those students that can't make it into the American universities and that can't study. I mean, if you say in Egypt that I'm studying in Al-Azhar, they'd be like, oh, okay, mash.
Yeah. Just
no problem.
And in the past, it was a prestigious place to be.
In the past. But now if you just say I'm in Al-Azhar, even the taxi driver will be like, oh, from which country?
Yeah.
Oh, from South Africa. Oh, mashallah. Rabbana yahdik, may Allah guide you, So it's not something which is revered upon. All right? But if you read the works of Sheikh Fazlur Rahman al-Ansari in one of his books called Life and Thought, and Sheikh Fazlur Rahman al-Ansari is the type of scholars that we need in today's time. What I'm saying is, he had degrees in science, philosophy, economics. He was a master of those fields. He completed, and that is why before you become an alim, make sure that you, for example, have a matric certificate. Make sure that you have studied. That's why I would always see the Western students that would come to Egypt would excel in the Al-Azhar. Why? Because most of them come with degrees. And it was a totally different setting with the students from South Africa and the students from America. It's a total different discussion. Even when you speak with them, it's so matured. It's so in-depth. It's so to do with modern and contemporary things which are happening. Even the imams that used to come and do short courses in the Al-Azhar from America, you would be, wonderstruck by the topics that they choose and how they research. So we need to, as ulama, learn how to research.
Yeah, because research is also a skill.
Research is also a skill. Public speaking is a skill. English, having command of the English language, which then, if the imam has the command of the English language, when he speaks on that mimbar, then the doctor, the lawyer, the layman, everybody will be able to say that, subhanAllah, this is our imam. This is the face of our community. People will look up. It should make that a layman can come and speak to you, and a medical qualified doctor will ever come and speak to you and have a discussion with you. But if the imam is using words which not even a small child can use, if people are not understanding what he is saying, so that is why we have these petty debates, because we are not engaged in other, and that is why also this goes to the problem that we only do, for example, Darul Uloom, and we only then, so Hifz and Darul Uloom, and then you want to, so we don't have other skills. But if we can put up other skills, then we can maybe open up a counseling office, which is to do with imamat.
Right.
You can open up office for leadership skills for students that have completed in universities and that. That also, so you're also dealing with the community. You can open up, for example, where you have, what do they call, coaching skills, which is also, so the imam can work within his field, but just expanding if he has academic studies and academic qualifications. But the problem is we stuck with, now you are stuck with a small salary and that, but you don't also have the skills, you know, to increase that salary. So that's where we turn to business, or you turn to. So I mean, it's just something which the imams need to sit down and discuss. Workshops need to be created, programs need to be introduced in order to uplift and empower the imams, and also for the muadhins. You know, there needs to be classes for them. There needs to be other skills that they can give to the muadhins. And in this way, it can also increase the salaries.
So while you're talking, I'm just thinking about what you're saying. And again, if there's compliance with the labor legislation, with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, for example, if there's compliance with working hours, if there's compliance with leave provisions, if there's compliance with those type of things, then clearly you're going to need two imams, because one imam can't do it. You're going to need two imams. You're going to need two muazzins. Then at least they'll have time to further their studies, to do research. If they have proper working hours, if they have proper leave, you know, they can have time off, not only time off with their families, but they can have time for their personal development as well.
And I think so there's nobody really fighting for imams, you know.
Right.
And most of the imams, I don't know if we are well aware of our rights, you know. So even if I don't know if you're well aware of your rights, or do you have anybody, can you take it on as the imam, you know, or is it risking your, you know, they'll just tell you we'll find another imam or something like that that's more better. And also, you know, so this is the problem that we are experiencing, that the imams, like you said, alhamdulillah, now they have made it where most of the masajid you will find two imams.
Right.
But still, you will find some places where there's one muadhin, and I feel that is heavy upon the muadhin to alone. I mean, it takes an impact, especially the microphone and your voice, and you calling out, and you know the effects of the microphone. And secondly, you know, it's like reading Qiraat 5 times a day, you
Right.
know, because the energy that you use to call out the adhan, I mean, it takes a toll on your lungs, and you know, so you need time to rest. I mean, sometimes we as the imams, who don't even read so loud, when you're reading on the 3rd or 4th day of your imamate, you can feel that your voice is, but you know, so, and then also the imam, we can come 2-3 minutes just before the namaz or whatever. The muazzin needs to be there
Ahead of time.
Ahead of time.
Yes.
So, you know, the muazzins, it's also very difficult for them. So I think so, you know, we need to look at the laws which are drawn up for the labor laws, and I think so this needs to be implemented. For example, stuff like medical aid, and I believe there was some people who were getting together. I believe there's something running where they wanted to do medical aid for the imams, and they wanted to, I think so, medical aid and all of that, which to assist the imams in that. There's a muadhin, for example, that I know of, that when he retired, there was no pension, there was no, you know, the payment that was given to him was very poor.
Right.
Now he's sitting with no job, he's basically renting a place, and the community just carries on with life. He's a bit sickly, nobody has offered to assist with it, with that sickness, and you know, it's almost like we have become dehumanized, you know, desensitized the communities, you know. So we don't have, the community is at this moment, like just in a nutshell, we would say that the community, everybody is saying, including myself, we're all saying that as long as it's not happening to me, it's fine.
Yeah.
You know, as long as it's not happening in my yard and in my space, it's fine. So,
okay, probably an appropriate time to take our final ad break. Viewers, please stay with us. After the break, we'll continue with this discussion, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome back again. We're discussing employment conditions of imams and muazzins. We were talking about how important it is, and Sheikh was telling us that it's important that imams and muazzins get training. And we've got in South Africa things called like a training levy that employers pay, and that can be used beneficially. They can send employees on training and get tax benefits. So maybe something like that needs to be implemented for muazzins and imams as well.
I mean, that would be fantastic if something like that can be implemented, especially for the muazzins also. Sometimes I feel that, looking at the muazzins, I mean, most of our muazzins are foreign also, and most of them have communication problems.
Right.
So they can't express themselves. So I think so this would be something nice to empower the muazzins in that, so they can better express themselves and also better assist in building the community with the imam. I think so that would be something which would be very beneficial.
And that is important. So viewers, for a start, those of you involved at the masjids, think about these things, come up with ideas to find ways of getting training for the imams, for the muazzins, look at the training levy that the law makes provision for, find ways of getting training institutes where people can, and maybe we need to look at setting up training institutes apart from the Darul Ulums for places where people can get the type of training. I'm not sure whether anybody really offers. I know of one or two places where they offer training for muazzins to give azan, but I'm not sure that that's widespread or done at any scale at all in South Africa.
I mean, they brought somebody over who did a whole workshop on the muazzin and the importance of pronunciation and so forth. I found it to be very beneficial because they invited all of the muazzins to come over and join this program. That was it. I've never heard of anywhere where the muazzin gets a certification for his adhan and for having gone through the studies of how to give the adhan, maybe a basic Arabic course. Alhamdulillah, many times you would find that the muazzins that would come from Malawi and that they had a background of studying, many of them can speak Arabic, many of them have studied in the madrasas, and many of them have qualified and so forth. And sometimes we don't even know about that. Sometimes we don't even, I met once when we went to Polokwane, there was a muazzin who was qualified, who was a graduate from Newcastle University that spoke very well Arabic, and and it's almost like nobody took note of him, nobody knew the qualifications that he had. So I think so this would be something good for the muazzins, that they have a certain type of workshop that teaches them the adhan and so forth, and Quran and all of that, and this would be very beneficial.
And of course, you said it's important. If the imam is not there, it's the muazzin actually who should be stepping in his place. And maybe that's why we see in the masjid, when we have salah, the muazzin stands behind the imam. I suppose in case the imam has to step off suddenly, the muazzin can take his place. So it is a really important
It is important.
position.
And also, if we can add one more thing, also the structure of our masajid. I know in Cape Town it's something which is very nice, and Egypt and all of the countries, for example, even if you go to Turkey, and that once the imam is finished with salah and he goes to his room, the office which the imam has, and I think so that is something which is very vital for us to have. It is something which is a necessity in the community, that the imam has an office probably connected to the masjid. Because one of the problems that you find in today's time, which is really annoying, is for example, when the imam comes in, obviously you will have to walk in from where the general masses come in from, and when you're coming into the masjid, sometimes it's so difficult for you to get to the front because this one is standing and this one is the ones, even somebody pulled me back thinking that I'm trying to go to the front. And then they realize that it's the imam, and the beauty is that we know even the sunnah of the Prophet was that he had his room. And when the muazzin would say, Hayya ala salah, that is when the Prophet ﷺ would exit from his room. and everybody would be seated. We need sequence in the masjid. So now you come into the masjid, and I tell you as the imam, it just annoys you because this one's standing, the one in the first surf is looking back.
Waiting, where's the imam? Why is he
Waiting,
not
where's the
here?
imam? And then you find someone staring at the clock.
Yeah.
You know, when they, say for example, namaz starts at 7:30. When 7:30 strikes, it's almost like this one is looking at the clock, this one is looking back, one is looking at his watch, this one is standing. You know, it's almost like, oh, what's happening? It's time up. Where's the imam? You know, so we need to have sequence. We need to have patience in the masajid. And I think so it would be better if everybody is seated nicely, and the imam has his office, which is beautiful in Egypt. Everybody sits down, and when the clock strikes, for example, 4:30 for the iqamah to be given, the mu'adhin alone stands up. He goes into the front where the imam is to read, and he gives the iqamah. When he says hayya ala salah, they just see the imam exiting and everybody stands up. It's a beautiful thing. It shows sequence and it brings into yourself character. And then the imam goes. Now that is one part which is a benefit of having an office adjacent to the masjid. Secondly, it is important. Why? Because the community can come and see the imam. The imam can give lessons to the mu'adhin in that office of his. Whatever mistakes from the mu'adhin, the imam can call him and sit him down in the office. So the imam can even spend time with the mu'adhin. We don't even maybe need to do workshops in that, because the imam can train the mu'adhin.
So not only the imam and the muazzin, I suppose we as musallis also need to be educated.
We as musallas also need to be educated. The imam can have his books in that office. Like for example, my teacher, we used to go and sit with him. All of his books for studying and preparing the Jummah khutbah would be in the office. His jubbas and that would be in the office.
Right.
His second pair of sandals, it used to be like the second home. Why? Then he spent more time at the masjid. You know, so...
Okay, and with that, Sheikh, Jazakallah for making yourself available, for coming here. Viewers, I'm sure you'll agree with me, a very important subject, very important topic, very important role in our community for the imams and the muazzins. And as the Sheikh said, they need to be trained, but also obviously we, those of us who go to the masjid, inshallah we go to the masjid, we also need to be trained about how to behave in the masjid, how to behave towards the imam, how to behave towards the muazzin, and people running the masjids need to perhaps look at ensuring that imams are not only paid enough but work decent hours, have time off to see their families, ensure that there's compliance with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, ensure that there's compliance with the Labor Relations Act, ensure that they're at least contributing, if nothing else, to the UIF fund, so that one day if the imam or the muazzin is out of a job, at least they can claim UIF benefits while they looking for other jobs. Sheikh, Jazakallah for having made yourself available, and I can see this is an ongoing thing. Inshallah, this is not the last. We will call you in to assist again, to give us some more, share some more of your expertise with us. And I think we need to talk more about the imams and the muazzins, inshallah.
I mean, inshallah, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept and also make it easy for the imam and the muaddins and all of those that are finding it difficult where they are working, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala change the situation and make it, you know, a means of us moving forward rather than moving backwards, inshallah.
Amen. Viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good night, inshallah. We will be back next week with another edition of Legalese.